All right, so I think that we are now streaming live on Facebook. So I'm very pleased to present to you Rajat Parr, which is, I think, somebody that everybody knows in the wine world. But for those who doesn't, Rajat, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, Rajat Parr. I'm here in Santa Barbara. I have a vineyard here and we make wine here in Santa Barbara. And yeah, that's that's pretty much here.
That's pretty good. I think that a lot of sommeliers here in Canada have had the chance to see you during some 360 about a year and a half ago now here
Yeah.
in Montreal. So I think that they've learned to know you a little bit more, knowing that you started as a chef. So I think that you've always had this big interest in the hospitality industry. But what is it that made you go from being a chef to then a sommelier and then, well, bottling your own bottle?
Yeah, I think the process, some people do backwards. I did it the other way around. I wanted to be a chef and I went to culinary school, and
Hmm.
while I was in culinary school in New York, I fell in love with wine, and I decided to not pursue my cooking career, but to start learning about wine. And at that time, there was not many wine schools, so I
Indeed.
learned. This is in '96, so I studied, read myself, and traveled around the world to meet people and taste the wine, and then I got curious about how wine is made, so I
Hmm.
started making wine in here in Santa Barbara, and that's been an amazing process of having planting your own vineyard, uh,
Yeah, right.
and then but we and now I mostly focus. I have a new vineyard which now I'm farming myself,
Hmm.
uh,
That's
which,
pretty amazing.
which is going to be interesting for in 10 years from now, maybe. But it's
We're
so,
sure looking forward to that.
yeah, it's the whole process because it's difficult to just wake up one day and say, oh yeah, I'm going to do this without knowing anything about it. So I think it's been an amazing journey to learn the whole process of course,
Of course.
enjoying wine, why, how, to who. Yeah.
And what is it that made you choose to, well, live in the United States? Because you've traveled quite a bit. You started, of course, in India and then the United States and then the UK. But what is it that made you come back there?
It's just opportunity. I think
Hmm.
California it's America is a very funny country, as we all know.
Yeah,
Uh,
it is.
California is the only place I can maybe live. I don't think I will exist in any other state except California. Uh,
Okay.
and, people are open-minded and very, very welcoming, and it's always been a treat to be here to meet so many people who are so welcoming,
Indeed.
and I think the energy is good. And I also always have lived near the water. I was born in Calcutta, I was near the water, so I've always tend to live. I live 1 mile from the beach right now. Our vineyard is, I think, 8 miles from the ocean. My new vineyard is three and a
That's
half miles
fabulous.
from the ocean. So it's, I think the Pacific definitely influences a lot in our life. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I think that we're here today to obviously discuss the challenges of the profession of sommelier in the world, because obviously we've heard about it. COVID-19 as have had all types of effect on our profession. So we'd like to know what's your take on it, and in the many different roles that you might have had in the industry. So first, as a producer now, how is the current situation affecting you?
You know, it's a, I I believe in a Buddhist philosophy. So this is something which is the world is facing together. And
Hmm.
as much as we want to complain about this is basically a reality check for
It is.
because us as humans, we have taken advantage of the planet and exploited it to a degree which is way more intense and than anything else. So I think that's one way to look at it, because for us, of course, we are suffering in we make the wine of our own vineyard. We sales are whatever, but who cares about the sales part? I think
Yeah.
that this process, if we are able to stay in business, the process of getting out of this and getting better and taking care of the planet better. That's a lesson hopefully everyone's learned. And we all have our challenges personally, emotionally, financially,
Of course.
and it hits us different ways. So I'm hoping that the human race will come out of this stronger and pay more attention to what's happening around us. For me and Sashi, my partner, for us, it's important that we pay the same respect we did to Mother Earth, and use the resources consciously, and try to improve from this, and not just take it for granted.
That's absolutely true. And I think that in all, negative situations, there for sure is going to be a lot of positive that as human beings we can take. And of course, as a winemaker yourself, right? So of course, being a producer, they will be affected. I think that a lot of vineyards right now are maybe or potentially going to benefit from it if there's less pollution eventually because of COVID-19, and if people are willing to change eventually their habits. I think that that could be also a very positive outcome, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think also it will create some better efficiencies in the world, with in the wine world especially. I mean, I think that many people who are drinking wine around the world don't really know what's in the bottle sometimes,
Exactly.
and I think that hopefully that in California people are quite health conscious, and it's the highest, maybe the second highest. I guess Vermont is the highest percentage of organic farming.
Yes.
And it's also a much smaller state compared to California. And California is uses a lot of chemicals in the farming. So hopefully this will be to awaken, and big business, big pharma, big companies all have to pay attention to what people want. So I think that'll be something which will create some more efficiencies in the world. Yeah.
Totally agree. As a sommelier, how do you think that this will affect the profession? Because obviously we've seen a lot of restaurants that were closed during months, a lot of restaurants that are now closed for good. So how do you think the industry in general will be affected?
It's hard to exactly say, but in my mind, I think of this because so many of my colleagues are either closed their restaurant or have moved on from their workplace. So it's a very sad thing, but I think that us in the community, I think we'll come together and help each other out. There's many different resources, because hopefully this is something which is going to be temporary, but maybe a longer temporary than normal. I mean, when this thing started, everyone thought, oh yeah, 3 months, 6 months, but clearly this is something that will continue for at least a year. So we have to adapt, and the role of a sommelier might have to temporarily change, or have to kind of use a different platform. And I think it was often one thing we always lacked in the sommelier world, even when I was that the education aspect, because we are so busy working that we gave all our energy to work. We are working whatever, 80 hours, 100 hours a week, which is normal for a sommelier. And I think now that's not happening. So I'm hoping, and I've already been a part of some different discussions with people, they're creating opportunities to teach as a group, because I think that we've seen more young people join the sommelier teams around in different restaurants. But maybe, so when I started my first sommelier job, I was 24 years old, and it was unheard of to be a sommelier at 24 years old. This is 20 years ago. 24 years ago. So you can do the math. It was so for me, I was young, of course, so I had to kind of grow a beard, so I would look older, because people when come out, they're like, we need a sommelier. Oh, that's me. You? Okay. How old are you? And you say, I'm 25, 24, and they'll look at you, they're like, huh. But today's world, there's so many sommeliers who are like, maybe an assistant or something, and who are young. So I think that, we have to adapt. And I think education was something which was difficult because, back then there was no, of course, Google and stuff like that. Now there is.
Of course.
But Zoom was I'm sure the stock market of the stock, what are the Zoom is now a very big company probably. So anyway, so I think education, I think, because I can't be with you, talk to you in person. Here I am sitting in my house in Santa Barbara and talking to you in Quebec. It's like this. Hopefully there'll be more opportunities for education, sharing thoughts. All through the lockdown, I was a part of many different discussions with friends of mine. Also, I was just listening to so many different discussions with different wine growers in Germany and Australia, and I think that it will connect us in a way. And I think that even though the job of the sommelier is not there, maybe we will make sure that everyone adapts into a new kind of thought process and not waste time. Because I think in a time like this, the easiest thing to do is, let's be lazy. Let's just collect unemployment and let's just wait for the government to do something. But we cannot waste time. We have to do something. I leave the house and go to the vineyard as often as I can. I can, of course, sit and watch movies on my couch, but I don't want to do that. I'm reading about farming. I'm reading about different things which will make me better in the vineyard. And I think that that's just me. But as someone is, I think more reading, more interaction, more things like this will really make us stronger. Because when we come back out of this and life will be somewhat new normal, we'll be prepared to take that on and be more knowledgeable and more stable and be ready. Because also the dining space will change. It's not
true.
I mean, already what we've seen in other parts of the world, of course, America is still kind of pretty locked down in places, but in other parts they have created different systems and Canada, of course, is much more progressive than the U.S. for sure, because of the stupid leaders we have here. But I think we will evolve and kind of create another semi-dimension in our own world as sommeliers. So, and that's going to be people who are on the floor doing it will create that. So.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that what we've seen too is that people were kind of spending a lot of time on social media, but now they've understood that there's also an education opportunity and a connecting opportunity to, as you were saying, be talking with people from vineyards all over the planet and exchange about the profession of sommelier with people literally in other continents. So I'm sure that this has been very positive in that sense. But there's one question that I wanted to ask, and of course, the profession of sommelier sometimes is not necessarily recognized in a restaurant. A lot of restaurants do not have sommelier, and they only have managers who take care of the wine list. But how do you see the sommelier role evolve? Will it be more towards a management position? How do you see it if there are to be cuts in costs for the restaurant management?
Yeah, unfortunately for now, it is the easiest position to cut. So, I remember when I was a young sommelier, I used to also manage. I used to hate managing. I didn't like doing a payroll and wait every night to cash out all the waiters. It was, I thought, well, come on, I'm here to serve wine. But then you realize as you get older, you're like, you have to be a word my friend Bobby Stuckey uses, a hospitalian. You have to always think about the guest and we'll do whatever. Right. And there's another word which my friend Jordan McKay, he used early on. I think he wrote an article on this many years ago, before all this, of course, called sommelier. So basically a sommelier who's also a manager. And I think that will happen. Now the question is the employer, do they want to get a better manager and an okay sommelier, or they want to get a sommelier with okay? So, of course, the smart people out there will try to be good at both. And this is the time to get better in either. If you're stronger wine knowledge, but you don't like doing manager stuff, maybe learn that, because you will need to do both. You will need to do as many positions and be completely, useful for the restaurant, for the hotel, for a chain, whatever the case may be. It's time to adapt and adapt in this new environment.
That is true. And I think a restaurant will get the most ROI with someone who is passionate and very knowledgeable about, the wine world. But at the end of the day, if that person is also able to make sure that the bottle they're selling is, giving more return on investment to the restaurant, I think that's where the key really is, right?
Yeah, and technology will play a bigger part, I think, as much as I don't, I'm an old school guy. I was always in the beginning hesitant of using iPad, and I'm pretty savvy with the computer, but I was always I was afraid that maybe the person who is the guest might not understand it. So I think with this, technology will increase. I think people will, have better ways of sharing knowledge through electronic versions of a phone or iPad, or modern ways of education. If someone wants to learn about a wine, click on it and they'll take you to the vineyard and show you where it is, tell you the soil, and then of course attach the POS system, inventory system, all of that. Because the wine business is interesting, because it's about people making the wine, people growing the grapes, people bottling it, people selling it, and people serving it. It's a lot of hand of a person, or a man or a woman. But then we have very little technology in between all this process, which is fine, I guess. But we have to connect with the customer. And, I had my first, virtual wine dinner. In the beginning, I was like, what a strange idea, because there were some people who, I think it was restaurant, they sent dinner and 2 bottles of a wine I made to each guest, and they invited the chef and me, and we organized like this Zoom, and everyone was like talking about the wine. I was talking about the wine, the chef talking about the food. It sounded weird in the beginning, but then I'm like, so cool. All these people are sitting in the house, bored out of their mind, and here, so things like that. Maybe different technology, maybe. Also when the restaurants are, it's going to be maybe less seats, of course. How will they adapt to make sure they can stay in business and still pay their rent, and the employees also have to overlap how many things they do. So, yeah.
Certainly not an easy challenge that is facing all the people in restaurants right now. That's for sure. Have you come across any tool so far in terms of POS or inventory management in the US? Are there anything or outside of the US?
Not there's nothing here which there was like there was one we used back inventory system, but that was nothing really which joins with the POS system. The program which Jan has, Alfred, which he's working on, which is the, I think, the coolest thing I've seen. Hence my connection, kind of funnily, to Quebec and this all with because I met him when I was there several years ago. So things like that. But that's it's also, you have to adapt that, use it in the restaurant or the hotel or the retail shop. The key thing is to connect the producer with the guest through the role of a sommelier or something which will keep it going. Otherwise the guest will never learn. So the education, of course, you also have to make the company you work for somewhat profitable. Otherwise they won't need you in the job. So then you need technology for that. So I think something like what Jan is doing, that's very, very important for someone who kind of use that program in the restaurant. I'm good on technology, not that great, but when you see something like that so easy to use, you're like, wow, cool.
That's the thing. Yeah, funny you mentioned them, because I think Alfred Pro is a solution to many of the current challenges, because we were talking about management and then inventory. Those are I would say the type of things that the sommeliers don't really love, that's not the best part of their day-to-day
Yeah.
job, right? So I think that having a tool which enables not only to, have the current inventory in real time, but also enables a customer, if there's no sommelier on the floor, to see where that bottle of wine is from and a little bit of the story behind it. I think that's also a great complement to having a sommelier
Oh, for
working on the
sure.
floor.
Yeah, I don't think a role of a sommelier will ever be replaced. I mean, I
No,
hope
of course
there's
not.
no robots ever in this world. But I think that if we can use technology to our benefit,
Hmm.
and that gives us a way to connect the whole system, the wine system, whatever that is, in a small restaurant or a big hotel, and connect that and make sure that the business stays afloat and you have enough information for the guests. Because in the end, guest satisfaction is the number one goal.
That's the
Everything
thing.
else, and then to stay in business.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, both are quite important, that's for sure. And funny thing, you were mentioning the virtual wine dinner. I was thinking about that the other day, and obviously, a lot of winemaker travel all around the globe to promote their product and share their stories. Do you think that it will be, kind of a formula that will be changing too? Because in restaurants, you see a lot of winemaker dinner. Is that a thing that would help the industry in terms of, environment care?
yeah, I think that will just depend on who is, it's not everyone thinks alike. I think
That's for sure.
everyone. So you'll have to kind of. I hope that happens, but it has to be depending on the leadership of the restaurant or the hotel or the
Hmm.
company. But I think those things, will start from certification. First you practice it, then you have some sort of certification, which is then recognizable, and then you can kind of use that in your I guess I don't want to use the word marketing, but in your
Communication.
communication. Yeah, that's a better.
Some sort
Yeah,
of way to put it.
I don't like the word marketing. I like communication. Yeah.
No, that's very, very interesting because we wanted to know also, you've talked about the role that's changing and the role also of the training that has to do in the career path of a sommelier. So do you think that there's anything that should change, in the curriculum, basically, of all these, the industry school?
I don't know what the I know I never did a wine school, so I don't know what.
Mm-hmm.
But if I was going to ever be a part of it or teach, I would
Mm-hmm.
always I would always come back from. I wish I had learned viticulture first,
Mm-hmm.
winemaking second, and then understood uh, like blind tasting and theory. I learned it backwards. I learned wine tasting first, theory after, and viticulture winemaking was much later. That's how my career has been, and I think that's a lot of young people now. Most young people I talk to, they know Pulsar, Gamay, Sauvignon, but they don't know Cabernet, Merlot. Because you can like even the grape varieties, and then you don't know how the vinification is different of say for
Mm-hmm.
example Cabernet Franc in the right bank of Bordeaux versus Cabernet Franc in the Loire. People think, oh, it's Cabernet Franc, but it's the reason why it's grown, why it's made, because you can make a light Cabernet Franc in the right bank, and you can make a heavy Cabernet Franc in Chinon if you want. But that also comes with the culture, how the vineyards are, also the status of the place. So I wish I had
Mm-hmm.
learned that before I had learned about the place. So I would change
Totally.
in my mind the curriculum. I would, of course, pay attention to blind tasting and theory, but I would really, really start from the viticulture aspect and then winemaking, and then after that, because you can smell a wine, you say, oh, it smells like whole cluster. Why does it smell like whole cluster? Like, because
Exactly.
no one told me that. So I had
Mm-hmm.
to, when I made my first three vintages, then I understood. Before
Exactly.
that, it took me, 15 years to figure it out.
That is absolutely true, and I think that we cannot get enough of the experience on the field, learning about how the wine is made and exactly why it tastes the way it does, right?
But also the way things are happening now, I haven't seen the best. But like, I think that you will see this in the future. Producers will send small sample bottles of different things. I mean, I would love to teach someone about. I'll send a tank sample of like whatever to talk about these different things. Also, you have producers in Canada, or I don't know whether shipping laws will change at one point, but you're not supposed to send just bottles of wine without a label because it's illegal in most parts of the world. But that would be kind of cool to kind of talk about with producers. And also another thing to think about is, I mean, I don't want to insult anyone in France, but it's a different world. Not many in one region, maybe not the top 5 producers even see eye to eye. Right. But how cool it would be if you get them all together to talk about how they make different wines. They're sometimes brothers or uncles, or they're like don't like each other. But who cares? At this point, we're here to teach people and talk about things and talk about the place. But maybe it'll bring people together, realize that there's no need to argue about something so minuscule, but it is about teaching and education.
That's actually a very interesting idea, because it kind of brings me back to your book, The Sommeliers at Loss of Taste, right? In which you explain a lot about how the terroir has an impact on the wines and why these wineries are so much more special than other ones in particular regions. And I think that the idea of having those small samples could be super interesting for sommeliers who don't necessarily have the means to travel, because that's also a tricky part of our profession, right? It costs a lot of money to travel. So
I know. Tell me about it. If I had saved all the money and not traveled and drank bottles and eaten everywhere in the world, I'd be a rich person.
Yeah, a lot of us would be. That is definitely true. We have a question from someone in attendance here. He says, Claude Lalonde says, any chance that a sommelier could get paid on a percentage of the extra profit it brings to the business?
So yes, absolutely. That is something which I used to kind of do for in a restaurant when I was overseeing a program of. So how a scale would work is that of course you have your budget. Every restaurant will have a budget, and you would say that okay, the budget of the wine sales is say for example $100,000 a month, okay, and if you between 100,000 to 120, 150, 50 to 200, the scale goes up and you start getting a commission on that increase. And that is something which I think is very favorable, because the restaurant will, but it depends on how progressive the restaurateur is. It's not always the case. Is to kind of or for example, if a restaurant, I'll give an example right now in a restaurant, what they should do, and I'm not sure they're doing it yet, but with the laws changing, you can ship wines now, you can have a retail license, restaurants can have that, and you create a little wine club in the restaurant, and you have even though you can go to the restaurant, you can go only, with small capacity of guests allowed, or whatever the case may be, but to have a way of extending the restaurant service of, what, we're going to have you can have access to the wine list, and you create a wine club or something like that, or a small list at a lower margin, not the normal, whatever, 2, 3, 4 time margin restaurants have. And then at the same time, maybe the restaurateur or the chef will say, okay, you know what, I'll make something, whatever the case may be, some kind of a spice blend or things. The thing is that every restaurant must think about how they can extend the brand outside the restaurant, because inside a restaurant you only have whatever you have. If you have 60 seats, now you have 30 seats. So you have to think about, and you can't tell people, oh, you have to leave, it's the time to go, the next turn. You can, but hopefully people are more compassionate now than they were 4 or 5 months ago. But then you also have to extend that, and you have to get creative and find different ways of of doing things.
Yeah, that's totally right. I think that as we are in this new era, the reality is 100% different, right? So if we do not change our current business model, there's a lot of restaurants who just won't be able to survive, especially if there's eventually a second wave of that and we have to close those restaurants again. So most definitely, I think that creativity will be key in solving those challenges. We have other people here in the chat. Danielle is saying, I feel this is a great opportunity to move the role of the sommelier to a more strategic stakeholder in the business success, and thus with a greater risk reward related position. So that's exactly what we were just discussing, right? So there would be a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, and also I think what also I think we will see two things. I'll add to that is that we will see, sommeliers who are maybe not, who have, lost their jobs in a big city, and the big cities are going to shrink. People are going to go to the outskirts, and maybe there'll be better opportunity to open a restaurant maybe outside of the big city or in the country where it's less expensive, and you start smaller. I don't know how big the restaurants are in Quebec, in Canada, in America. They're too big. I always thought, I'm like, wow, what a massive restaurant. Who needs a 200-seat restaurant? Nobody. But maybe that's a way to have smaller restaurants. I live in Santa Barbara, and there's many restaurants. There's very few good restaurants. And maybe there'll be more people from LA opening restaurants in the countryside here, or the upstate New York, or maybe outside in the suburbs of Chicago, whatever the case may be. I think that's an opportunity, but also you might see people who are people who don't want to live in cities are going to live outside, and I think there'll be better talent. There'll be maybe three sommeliers who leave their job or have no job, and they come together and say, okay, let's open this cool wine bar, retail shop, whatever, and they do that because it's about sustaining ourselves, our families, and
and sharing our passion for what we do too, right? So I think definitely this will definitely benefit the smaller centers and not the big cities, because it's getting even more and more expensive nowadays, right? We have another question, which is, are we seeing bigger tips to compensate for lost sommelier revenues, kind of like customer empathy?
Yeah, I think so. I think I've seen, that I've heard stories about people tipping quite a lot more than normal.
Generously.
Yeah, because it's especially if you have the resource, why not? Yeah.
And I think people, that's maybe just a personal opinion, but having spent all that time at home, people will also much more enjoy their time in a restaurant and their experience overall. So they'll be even more happy. So I think sometimes, fortunately for the service team, more happiness means more money on tips. So
yeah, I mean,
that's also positive.
We don't have many restaurants open anywhere in the U.S. yet. I mean, at least I haven't left Santa Barbara, in the area a little bit, but I've heard a lot about this in cafes. When I go to get, if I go get a juice or something, whatever, it's but I guess when restaurants do open, whatever that is.
Totally. I would say, if there's one last question we could ask about, the challenge of our profession is, what do you think, or what would be the advice you would give to a sommelier that's currently in training and that's seeing that everything's evolving? Is there anything that you would advise them?
Yeah, just everyone must be very flexible. Everyone must adapt. Nobody can say, oh, this is all I want to do, or I'm only learning this. I think right now we have to take anything what we have. We can't be too picky, because I think we are in this position because we were too picky with everything. We only wanted to do this and do that, eat this, then go drink this. So we all have to adapt. And if you're a starting young sommelier, you should start learning. And I again go back, learn viticulture. Buy Jamie Good's book, The Science of Wine. Really pay attention to the basics, because I think that many times we want to go and only read about the cool and trendy wines and forget about what the classics are all about, because I think that we need them both, depending on what where you work. But at this time, doesn't matter where you work. If you only drink natural wine, go back to read about the classics. If you only do the classics, you must, read about natural wine, because you have to be adaptable, because you never
Right.
know where you end up, because it's the world is changing so fast.
It is.
And if you have time at home, you must stay connected with people who somewhere you can learn, and don't be too influenced too quickly. Take your time, make your decision. Don't just jump on one idea. And yeah.
That's, I think, a great advice. And to end this wonderful conversation, we'd like to know, like, what's next for you? Any project in particular you'd like to share with the sommeliers here in Canada?
As I said, I started working on this vineyard 4 years ago, and now we are going to make it a reality. And we planted a lot of fun varieties. So it's going to be hands-on farming, more time in the vineyard than the cellar, or less trips overseas, more time just farming the vineyard and
Mm-hmm.
being connected. It's something which is, I think, we all must, if we can, in the summer months, have a little garden, try to grow something yourself, try to think about diversity, think
Mm-hmm.
about polyculture, think about things which are going to, I mean, the word that no one talks too much about is try to be more, carbon neutral than adding any more weight on this world, because we've already
That's so true.
seen in these few months how the world pollution is much lower in major cities. And yeah.
That is very true. And I've heard from a little bird that you all are also considering aging some bottles underwater. Is that
uh,
so?
yeah. There's a friend of mine here. He's a diver.
Okay.
So we did some experiments of aging some of our wine under the ocean at
Mm-hmm.
at perfect temperature. And so
Wow.
we are doing, and now we're going to do some sparkling wine, which we make and age it on the ocean. And yeah, we've done the first
Wow.
trial, and I think we're going to when we again can get it, because we're supposed to do this last month, but now of course we can't do it yet. But if things, yeah, because it's a whole container, a cage which goes under the ocean,
Oh, wow.
and he dives it down to and docks it, and then 1 year later goes back and pulls it out. It's very, very interesting how
Pretty
the wine.
amazing.
Yeah, so it's a trial. We have not. It's again just something we are right on the ocean, so why not do it? You can do it here.
Absolutely. And you love the ocean, so
Yeah,
that's right on brand.
yeah,
Do you think that we'll be able to get our hands on some of these bottles eventually, or?
yeah. I mean, yeah. Why not? I don't. We are doing small lots only for us right now, and
Uh-huh.
we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm sure that he is going to my friend and who's doing this. I'm sure he's going to get other people to do it. It's really cool. The
That's
wine
cool.
really
It sounds
changes.
really neat.
No, the wine changes in a very positive way. It's in 1 year.
Awesome.
It almost like it doesn't age. So the
Hmm.
wine seems younger on the nose, but
Okay.
creamy on the palate,
Oh,
because
fabulous.
the bottle is sideways and the currents are going. So the bottle is not moving, but the liquid is moving inside.
Oh,
It's like
wonderful.
doing a bâtonnage inside the bottle.
A year long, literally. That
So
sounds pretty
anyway,
cool. I'm
yeah,
sure that a lot of sommeliers here would be really interesting in that project. So please keep us posted if
yeah,
any bottles become available to us.
yeah. Of course, we're gonna take it under the ocean as soon as we can, and then yeah, wine is a very slow thing, but with technology, it's become so fast.
Hmm.
But now I think it's going to become slightly slower again because we can't travel anyway. Well, hopefully there'll be other things to keep us busy.
I'm pretty sure I will, especially harvest coming right up. So
Yeah,
I have no doubt that you'll be quite busy in a few months.
yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
Well, thank you so much
Hey,
for making the
thanks
time
a lot.
to speak with us. And I'm sure
Okay.
we'll have the chance to connect eventually really soon. And we really hope that you come back to Montreal whenever it is possible for you guys
Oh
to
yeah,
travel
no,
here.
no, I was supposed to be there in June,
Right.
and of course this happened. But I have a yeah. I'll be there as soon as Canada allows us to come there. So
we will be waiting with arms wide open. Count on it. Wonderful.
Thank you so much. Okay, have a good evening. Thank you.
You too.
Bye.
Bye bye. Merci tout le monde pour votre participation en grand nombre et j'espère que ça vous a plu. À très bientôt.